This is the Breakfast Leadership Podcast. Boundaries or burnout, you make the choice. Here's your host, Michael Levitt. Welcome back. I've got David Neagle online. David, how are you?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
I am awesome. You are the author of The Millions Within and host of the Successful Mind podcast, amongst other things. You've worked alongside some relatively known people like Bob Proctor and Tony Robbins, and I say that tongue in cheek. I mean, I think half the planet knows those awesome individuals. So, what got you into the business of being a success coach?
It started off with me trying to figure out my own life. I had kind of a rough upbringing, and in my teenage years, I kind of raised myself on the streets of Chicago. I didn't get into any real serious trouble, but I was definitely making poor decisions in my life. I got married young, had a couple of children, and realized that I could not fulfill that responsibility, especially from a financial perspective, but I think from the perspective of being the father and the husband that I wanted to be, I was not prepared for that. And the financial piece stuck out the most because we were really struggling. And I was trying to figure out, how do I get out of this? How do I turn the situation around? So I started asking people that were close to me, friends, relatives, that type of thing. And the only thing that they could tell me, Michael, was you shouldn't have quit high school. And I was like, yeah, well, I can't go back and change that. So what's my alternative? And they basically said, stick with the job that you have, do really good, and don't get fired. And I was driving a forklift at the time, and I could not see myself doing that for the rest of my life. I mean, I was like, there's just no way that I can do this. I have to find a way out. But I was working 6.5 days a week. I was working 2 jobs. And this is pre-internet, so I couldn't even use that as a resource. I needed to go back to school. I needed to learn something. That was my thought process at the time. And I thought about that for months, and I was trying to figure out some way that I could do this. Couldn't do it. So I became more and more frustrated. And one night I decided that, through a kind of an emotional meltdown on my part, that I was going to start changing my attitude, the way that I viewed what I was doing, because I was getting in trouble. I was not treating people well. I was very angry and getting more angry by the day, mostly at myself because of the situation that I created. It was, I was going through a really hard time going home and seeing where we were living and where I had, because of my choices, where my kids were growing up. It was not a good neighborhood. We lived next door to a drug dealer. It just wasn't who I wanted to be. And so I started to change my attitude, because it was an idea that came to me in the back of a trailer one night. And I thought, maybe there's something to that. I had been hearing it my whole life. This little voice in my head said, change it. So I decided that was what I was going to do. So I focused on 3 things. One was acting like I love what I did. The second one was doing everything to the best of my ability. And the third one was treating everybody with complete respect. And I could not logically figure out how that would make any difference at all. But in 30 days, my income tripled. And that was not supposed to happen. So I went from $20,000 a year to $62,000 a year. That completely changed my life, because I was able to pay my bills. We were able to buy a house within a year of me doing that, because we could save enough money. And I seemed to be, things were getting better. Like everywhere it was getting better. And it was just keeping with really strict and committed to changing those 3 things in my attitude. So that caused me to want to know what the hell happened. I mean, it wasn't supposed to happen. People were calling it luck. I didn't believe it was luck. I believed I actually did something that made a difference in my own life. And I wanted to know more about it so that I could continue on with that process. So I began to study. And one of the first people I came across was Tony. This was back in the early 90s. His infomercials were out. I bought his personal power tapes, went to one of his seminars. And that started me down this path of something that I wasn't even aware of at the time, which was self-improvement. I mean, I would go in and look for biographies of people in the library just to see, what is it that other people did that was different, that made their lives successful, that I was not doing. And over a period of 7 years, I just started to put the pieces together. And then I started helping other people. They would ask me, like, what is it that you did? Like, your life is so much different. And I would just say, here, do this, do that. I would give them tips and advice on different areas of their life that they were having trouble with. And the ones that used the advice changed it. And I was like, there's really something to this. So one of the things that changed significantly for me was this company that I was working for. I helped them become really successful. And I did not understand at the time the significance of what I had done. I started off there as a truck driver. And when I left to start my own business, I was in charge of expanding the company across the country. And I was like, I don't want to do that. If I could do that for them, I could do that for me. So I took what I knew and what I appeared to be good at the time, which was coaching other people. I learned how to do seminars, and I struck out on my own around the end of 1999, and I never looked back.
It's an amazing story, and I can relate to a few things, and one of them was, the angry part of times, and when I was going through my burnout state back, a decade ago, and reflecting back on that time that led up to the burnout, I wasn't very happy. I was, quite upset with life. Even though I had a decent job, I wasn't thrilled with it. The demands of the job were a bit overwhelming, and having 3 young kids, the neighborhood was decent. I'm not sure what part of Chicago you were in. I used to live in Naperville and Aurora on that end and work downtown all the time, but I know Chicago has some not so nice neighborhoods. And
went to high school in Berwyn.
Okay.
Berwyn Cicero, and then later on lived in Downers Grove and Darien, and then raised my kids out near Rockford.
Yeah. So South Side stuff, and even further south. Yeah, I know some of those areas were, when I was there in the late 90s, weren't exactly, what you would consider the greatest of neighborhoods, but,
right.
I didn't go into, deep into them to see, but you could tell, just in driving through. But yeah, that angry part that has such a long ranging impact on things, because when you're angry, your energy and focus is on that, and it just impacts everything else. But you had that mind shift, and I love those 3 points, and they're simple to launch, but very hard to implement unless you've got the right mindset to say, okay, let's, act like I really love what I'm doing, and, be the best I could be at this role, and respect others. It's so simple when you look at it. And if it was up on a, poster, follow these 3 things, and people will look at it and they'll kind of glaze over it and not implement, but you did, and you tripled your income in a month. I mean, that is unheard of, to have that type of impact just by shifting that. And thankfully you were aware of that power, and you realized, okay, I'm onto something here, and let's dig into this and figure out, okay, what is this? And obviously it's done quite well for you, and you're impacting so many people with the work that you're doing now because of that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was that it seemed too simple at the time to have made that kind of a difference. I wasn't sure that there wasn't something else that happened, and I was ready to find out that I was wrong, and that it was luck, and that's how the world worked. But I really didn't believe that that's what it was. So what I became aware of later on was that because I shifted my attitude, I shifted my perception, and I was seeing things very differently. And the opportunity that allowed me to triple my income had been around me for 2 years, but I never recognized it as an opportunity. And some people hear that and they think to themselves, were you an idiot? Or like, how do you not recognize that as an opportunity? And the funny thing is that the opportunity for a person to be, do, or have whatever it is that they want is already around them right now. And if they've never had any experience with that, they would not recognize it as an opportunity. And Hill talked about it in Think and Grow Rich. He called it the sly disguises of opportunity. He said very often people miss opportunities because they actually see them as misfortune or temporary defeat. And it doesn't look like there's any benefit to doing that. So that's exactly what I actually had broken this way down. There's a lot more to it when I actually figured it out, but the opportunity that was there, I didn't see it as an opportunity because I was judging it as something that it wasn't. It was just an angry judgment that I was making in my mind. So that was, perception is reality in the mind of the perceiver, right? And that's exactly the way that I was perceiving it. So it did me no good until I changed the way that I was thinking.
I had a recent example of that, with a client that I was pursuing for some consulting work, and I thought everything was going along well, and more or less at the last minute, they decided to utilize an internal resource for something that wasn't in any way in alignment with what they had asked for me to do, but they felt that it would be beneficial. And at first I was like, are you kidding me? I've spent all this time going back and forth, shared resources and all of that, and it didn't happen. But then I paused and I'm like, no, wait. In your role, when you're aiming to help people, the goal is to help people. And I did. And they went in a different direction, but they still got help from me. We didn't enter into a financial situation because of it, but I know that the resources they did provide this individual, in all likelihood, they're going to use it and hopefully change direction on their life to make their lives easier. And if we have the power to be able to help somebody make their lives easier and better for themselves, that's a superpower. And money will take care of itself. And, I looked at it and I'm like, but I said, I need to change my mindset on this. And I did. And half an hour later, I get a note from somebody. It's like, yep, we want to roll with this and we want to, go ahead and, purchase one of your products and away you go. It was like, okay. A lot of times I think life is full of tests and, okay, are you ready for this? And the example you gave where you think it's, a misfire or something that's not appropriate, when in fact it's like, oh, you go down that road, now you're starting to look at 5xing and 10xing and 20xing your income and ability to impact others. So you want to make sure that you have clarity when you look at things and give yourself that elbow room with your time and making sure you take care of yourself so you can be clear on those. Doesn't mean you're going to misfire and you're going to make a mistake from time to time. We're human. That's going to happen. But when you have that opportunity to look at something and go, wait. We'll be back to the show in a moment, but first I want to let you know today's show is brought to you by our wonderful sponsor, Cloud HQ. With Cloud HQ, you get access to over 20,000 influencers that have been curated by brands just like yours. If you're a brand, you know how difficult it is to find and connect with the influencers that your audience already knows and trusts. That's why I suggest you get Cloud HQ. When you sign up today, you get access to over 20,000 influencers on Instagram. You can see loads of data about their profile and engagement rates before you reach out, and you have direct access to their contact information so you can reach out to them on or off the platform. When you reach out to them on the platform, they offer automation tools so you can reach out to a bunch of those influencers at one time. This will save you a lot of time, and I guarantee it'll pay for itself in the first year. For Breakfast Leadership listeners, I'm offering a special discount. Normally, an enterprise subscription would go for over $1,500 a year. My friends at Cloud HQ are offering a subscription for just $499 a year. That's a savings of over $1,000. You can sign up today by using the discount code BREAKFAST and save, like I said, over $1,000 a year. Cloud HQ is a wonderful option for any brands that are looking to influence their marketing and looking to get their program off the ground. So sign up today using the link in our show notes and use the code breakfast and let me know what you think. Like I said, I guarantee it'll pay for itself in its first year. Cloud HQ is an amazing offer and it's a good option for anybody that's interested in influencer marketing. Now back to the show. If I approach this, then this, could lead to a new endeavor or make something more robust, or could help me build the framework for my next book, or interviews on your show. You name it, the sky's the limit. So it's just a case of making sure you have that clarity and be open to these opportunities and to look at them with clear vision than just immediately just passing it off as like, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like in the beginning, after when I coached with Proctor, one of the things that he told me when he was helping me understand the laws of the universe was he said, the idea is that you give first. You got to give in order to receive. And you have to be a good giver and you have to be a good receiver, and you have to know the difference between both. So it's gratitude and graciousness on both parts. And I developed this idea that ran behind everything that I was doing in that time was, how can I help this person? So that every interaction that I had with somebody else, I was going to try to leave better off than before they met me. And through doing that, I was able to see if I could help somebody, if I couldn't help somebody, could I recommend them to somebody else? Could I remember what they needed if I ran across somebody who could help them and make that connection later on? And in the early days, that's literally how I built my business, through networking my way into opportunities that allowed me to reach a much larger audience than I had in my own personal life. And then my business grew from that aspect. But it also helped so many other people's businesses grow.
I mean, that ties into Zig Ziglar and what he always talked about you'll help yourself by helping others. The more people you help, the more you're going to be helping yourself. Yeah. And that's pinnacle when you're in the business of serving others. Is if someone comes to you with a challenge or an issue, you want them to be better because of the experience of interacting with you, whether they work with you or not, or a case where, like you said, in your networking side of things is, okay, if I recognize that I'm not the right person to help you, it's on me, myself, to find somebody that would and know somebody. And that's where the beauty of networking is, because when you have a good network of a lot of different skill sets and things like that, you can, off the top of mind, oftentimes you can go, you know what, I'm not the right person for you on this one, but I do know somebody that I think is. So if it's okay with you, let me do an introduction. And it's a nice, warm, like I like to refer to it as a concierge type of handoff to somebody else. You've done the introductions. They kind of know backgrounds of them. So that way they can continue the conversation. So it doesn't reset back to the beginning. It's like they kind of know the story a little bit, and then they can continue and hopefully you get that person, the guidance that they need, whatever they need.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's 100% true. The thing that I have found is that the biggest problem that is, and it's pretty much uncoachable from my experience and from really looking at some people who were top coaches, like in the Olympics and various other areas, was that you can't coach a person on desire. Like, desire is an inside job. You either want it or you don't. And a coach may help you get clear on something, but whether or not you really desire to do something in a way where you're willing to sacrifice things that are of a lesser nature or less valuable in your life in order to gain something of more value for your life, that seems to be the differential between whether a person is going to really step into their potential, really develop self-awareness as to who they are, and allow themselves to experience the extraordinary abilities that we're all walking around with locked up in our inside.
And when they make that breakthrough, It's amazing. And as a coach, when you see somebody go through some challenges and they figure out, okay, this is how I'm going to do it, and they're going to break through. And like I said, some of the people you work with have made some gigantic strides in their impact and their income in a very short period of time. It's a good reminder to let people know. It's like, in many cases, not all, of course, but in many cases, they're a lot closer to their success that they want, whatever definition of success they have, than they think.
Yeah.
And it's subtle. It's a subtle tweak here, subtle tweak there, and again, more clarity on some things and narrowing a focus. I've got a good colleague of mine, and she self-identifies as somebody that has shiny object disease, and she's always trying different things. And everybody that knows her tells her, you got to stop that. Pick something. Pick something that that you are really, really good at, and you can do it better than anybody else, and go down that path and generate the revenue that you need. And then from there, you can pivot to the other things that you want to try. But it's easier for you to be able to do it from a state of moving and financial flow. So you're not necessarily borrowing from, different entities, or, hopefully not going into, drastic amounts of debt. But at least being able to navigate in such a way where you can cause the impact that you wanted to cause, and have that passion when you launched this endeavor. When you do that, the impact you're going to have is going to be bigger and bolder than you could ever imagine.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, well, a lot of people have that bright, shiny object thing. And I think that society sets us up for that in a huge way, because generally when we become aware of somebody who's accomplished something, they've already accomplished it. We didn't see the journey along the way, and what they sacrificed, what they went through, the disciplines that they had to develop, the obstacles that they have had to overcome that cause a lot of people to have failures or self-sabotage or move backwards. And we just think, oh, look how great this is. And without understanding cause and effect with success, people jump to conclusions as to how a person became successful. And that does a lot of damage, because especially today with the internet and social media, and all the people out there that are trying to give the idea that they're successful, like a picture on a yacht or next to a private plane or whatever. And then you talk to them and you find out they're actually broke, but they're trying to show that they're successful so that somebody will buy something that they have and become successful. It's like they have no clue, but generationally, it's something that people are putting out there as the answer to getting anywhere. And it's so far from the truth. It's actually pretty disturbing in a way, because it gets in the way of a lot of, I think, a lot of people's ambitions. And the more a person, if a person is going out and really working at trying to become successful in whatever it is that they want, and they're failing, and they don't know that they're not doing the right things, or they're not showing up the right way, they're reinforcing their own failure subconsciously, which makes it more difficult to overcome the next time, because every time that they quit, or every time they get that shiny object syndrome and jump from one thing to another, buying into the idea that something else is going to be easier, it's just a constant reinforcement of low self-esteem, and that they internalize it as something's wrong with them, so they have shame and guilt. And it's almost a disease in a way, and like it really prevents people from stepping into what they were put here to do.
Yeah, and it's amazing on the self-sabotage that people do. And it ties into what we talked about earlier too, about how people are a lot closer to success than they think. But in many ways, they're getting in their own way to prevent it, which is such an irony, because they're striving and really working hard to get to the next level, whatever that level is for them. But they're actually causing themselves the inability to hit that next level. It's them. And a lot of times people think, oh, it's external factors. It's I'm not, hitting the right clients, or they don't want, like I alluded to before, go through all this exercise and they ended up going with something that isn't going to fix their issue, in my opinion. But again, it's like, no, look and see, maybe change your messaging a little bit to make sure that it resonates with that person based on what they're looking for. Doesn't mean that they're going to do it, but they're obviously looking for something. And there was some type of roadblock that they had that made them determine, okay, I'm going to use something else. In this case, I think it was probably financial, because the employer was going to cover something internally. But as I know in the work that I do, oftentimes those employer-based benefits and assistance programs fall way short to what people actually need, because in the case of burnout, it's an epidemic in many industries, and employers aren't doing what they need to do to address it.
I agree. And in speaking of the self-sabotage thing, one of the things that I do with everybody that I work with personally is, before we even get started down the road of what they're going to do to get where they want to go, we reverse engineer their failure pattern, because everybody has a failure strategy. It's something that it's habitually ingrained in our mind to keep us safe when we're starting to go down a road where we're exploring unknown waters, so to speak. And I reverse engineer, how have you done this in the past, so that we know step by step what will happen, what will be the situation or the circumstance or the result that will kick off an emotional response, that will kick off a reactional behavior, that will kick off you agreeing with it and then deciding not to move forward, so that when it shows up, we've already talked about it and they know what it is and they can see it. Because when I first started coaching, what would happen is that people would hit this place and they were real enthusiastic. They were gung-ho. They were doing the work to a certain degree. Something would happen and all of a sudden they wanted to quit. But the problem that came along with it was that, for some reason, and I didn't know this at the time, I was losing my authority with them. Like, I was on the outs now. Like, I was part of the problem and part of the enemy overnight. And I would be like, what the hell happened that caused that? And I realized that because they didn't know what was actually happening, everything that then suggested that they should move forward was placed in a position of, I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to look foolish. So when I started explaining to them and helping them reverse engineer their pattern, then when it would show up, we would be like, okay, remember we talked about this? This is your strategy to fail. And they would be like, yeah, that's right. Look at how this is actually showing up. So then I became their ally in working through the self-sabotage. And for the people that were really serious, that would actually stop and they would succeed.
Yeah, again, it's just one of those things where it's like a couple little tweaks here and there can make you go from, to borrow another author's book title, good to great. And a lot of people are a lot closer than they think. And the work that you're doing is making some tremendous impact in people. So
I think they're all closer than they think to some degree. Like, I think everybody can make some quantum leap. They may not be able to become a millionaire overnight, but a person has the ability to make a radical change in wherever they are that'll set them up to do that if that's what they want to do, as long as they're willing to play a little bit longer game. But you're right, people do not realize that they have the ability to change very specific results in their life very quickly if they understood themselves a little better and psychological and emotional tools to manage their own life.
Yeah, and they do that, the impact that they're going to have on their own lives and the ripple effect it'll have, throughout their life, and the people that they love and serve is going to make a huge, huge difference. It's amazing. So, David, I've enjoyed our conversations today. Where can people find out more about you and the awesome work you're doing?
Well, one of the things they could do is they could go on iTunes and look up the Successful Mind podcast. We're really big there. And if they want to learn deeper information, they can go to davidneagle.com. And we have a free download there called You Were Born to Be a Success. They could start, check that out also.
And I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So, David, thanks again for being on the show. Really appreciate you and the impact that you're having on so many people.
Thanks, Michael. Love being here.
Thanks so much. Hey, it's Michael again. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. If you're like many people, you're dealing with some significant stress and possibly approaching burnout. I know how you feel. In 2009, my burnout led to a year of worst-case scenarios. I do not want that to happen to you. If you go to breakfastleadership.com, you can register for a free webinar on burnout prevention, as well as get a free checklist to have successful mornings. Start off each day the right way. Again, that's at breakfastleadership.com. Also, since you are a loyal podcast listener, I'm asking you to like, rate, and review my podcast on iTunes. I look at all the reviews and appreciate your comments, and it helps other potential listeners discover the content I have on the show. I appreciate you, and thanks again for listening.